This girl was a real bully to my younger brother when they were at elementary school. She blamed him for things that she did and got him into trouble. The teacher was always more inclined to believe the girl over my brother because she was a small, cute, rich kid. Fast forward to this year. She's now a freshman, like my brother, and I'm a senior. She's trying to join clubs and student organizations. To give you some background, I'm heavily involved in extracurriculars and I'm president/captain for a lot of clubs/my team. So, she shows up to audition for the school play, and lo and behold, she's talking to some other girl about running into this kid that she used to bully but that she now finds cute. I couldn't help but interject. "Who are you talking about? My brother's name? Do you know him?" "I might be familiar," I replied, turning around, going to the front of the room, and politely asking everyone to be quiet while I introduced myself. "Hi everyone, I'm same last name as brother. I'm also the president of the drama program, as well as head director for this production." The look on her face was priceless. As you might imagine, she wasn't cast. I don't put up with anyone messing with my family. I had to evict some tenants from my beautiful 3BR 2BA home on 5 acres. It was a difficult decision, but I had no choice. They owed thousands, and there was no way we would ever see it. You can't get blood from a turnip. They left behind months' worth of garbage, dirty diapers, cigarette butts, and other gross things all over our carpeted home. Once I calmed down a bit, I started packing it all up and taking it to the dump. I went to the garage and found a piece of mail with their new address on it. I had a great idea. I wrote on all 23 boxes of garbage, including ones labeled kitchen, baby's room, master bedroom, spare room, and closet. Then I called the local sheriff and asked if someone could come with me to their house, because they clearly didn't have enough room in their moving truck for all their stuff. The deputy met me there, and I dumped 2 small pickup loads of box garbage on their front lawn and driveway. A big man came out of the house to kick my ass, but the deputy saw him, and as it turned out, he had a warrant, so a chase ensued. I was the kid who paid attention in class. I was known to explain the material in a more understandable way than the lesson plan did. I also helped my friends cheat on tests in multiple classes if they told me they really didn't understand the material. Some of them were out of school for a week at a time and would be so lost they really couldn't catch up normally. I was also on the receiving end of a lot of bullying, particularly from the jocks. The school doesn't care because they're the jocks, and the American South is football country. It didn't take long for most students to realize I was helping my friends cheat. They started copying my signals to cheat themselves. For over a year, everyone was lazy and let me do all the work, and I didn't mind. I was sitting near the front of the class, surrounded by about half the football team. This was after a particularly nasty bullying incident the day before. It involved biohazards and some pretty ugly words. My only friend in that class, who was also targeted, ended up not coming to school that day for the semester test. He was just trying to avoid contact and cool off. I review my test, noting that a solid grasp of the equations is essential. The test included formulas for finding wattage with limited information, conversion to joules, conversion from hydroelectric systems to mechanical systems, and even a couple of thermodynamics questions. The teacher clearly put a lot of effort into this test and seemed genuinely interested in science and teaching. He knew I was cheating, knew why I was doing it, and never brought it up. But that day, no way. My friend was at home having a bit of an emotional crisis because of the people I was now surrounded with. I was in a similar situation, and they were whispering loudly, "What's the answer to question 4?" I did a quick calculation, not for the test itself, but to get an idea of how I was doing in it. If they got every equation question wrong, and they did, they could still pass if they got even half of the multiple choice questions right. That's the No Child Left Behind policy, after all. I went through each multiple choice question in order of appearance and started listing the incorrect answers as I came to them. They watched me for about 20 minutes as I rattled off some random facts, but I gave the answer to the previous question to everyone else. After 50 questions, they all stood up at once to turn in their papers, and they only did the equations for a few of them. I finished my test, turned it in, and locked eyes with the teacher, who had already started grading them with a look of exasperation on his face. "Buckle up, Mr. Sanders. It seems that MFW athletes cannot fail any non-essential tests or be suspended from sports activities for 2 weeks. The MFW playoffs are this week. which means the semifinals of the state championship are coming up. On top of that, they were already short on players because not enough of them were doing well in school. In an effort to have enough players to compete, the coaches have been going around at lunch all week to get people to sign up for football. Unfortunately, we lost to our rivals 0-77 because half of the new players never practiced, and the other half were so worn out from practice that they couldn't perform. Even after this, the bullies still messed with me. They crossed the line by throwing bodily waste at me, among other things, just to screw over the entire football team. Bullying only stops when someone with authority steps in, but that only happens in movies and on Reddit threads. At some point, they got the principal involved and confronted me about what I'd done. I asked him to explain further, and he said that I'd caused half the team to fail a semester test. I asked how that was possible, given that they all took the same test I did at the same time. Unless they were copying my answers, I can't have affected their grades. If they did cheat, I would have failed too if I'd given them the answers they gave. Also, did they admit to cheating on the semester test? I think that's a pretty big deal, and I'd love to see the wording on whatever detention/suspension slip you're planning to give me. I never heard anything more about the cheating scandal, but I was on the principal's bad side afterwards, and he wouldn't back me up on the bullying situation. So, nothing changed, but I got to feel smug about it. Should I go to the principal's office for fighting again? Yes, and I came out on top this time too. I think we need to bring in some better people. Why aren't they here with me? I thought the policy was zero tolerance for both parties involved. Don't threaten me with jail. I already called the police, and they're on their way. My dad is involved too. But seriously, if we keep going like this, we'll have a comprehensive list of every student I can beat in a fight. I think we really need to address the issue of violence in this school. Yes, the police will want to review the video footage to verify that the attack was unprovoked. I'm not willing to accept another suspension. I'm not answering any more questions until the police arrive. Do you think I should call the superintendent too? What was he going to do, make my school life difficult? The physics teacher was a cool guy, and I got the feeling he was proud of me for the stunt I pulled, but I couldn't get him to talk about it. Other students were afraid to copy my work in other classes for a while. I did end up pulling something similar the next year in English, but I actually intended to bomb the test myself because they were watching me fill in the answers. I did it just to get one over on the rest of the class, as it was full of my former tormentors. I was the only one in the room, surrounded by people who treated me poorly but relied on me for their grade. They weren't prepared for it, but I was still going to pass, even with a 0 due to extra credit I had accrued. That's a story for another time, though. 2 other people from my English class also graduated on time that year. I guess I taught them a valuable lesson about over-reliance on others' comeuppance and dishonesty, but more likely, they just became more despicable with time. It's like an aged wine, but from the dollar store, left in a cabinet behind a full roach trap for about 20 years. It's like taking a mouthful of vinegar. It's rancid and unappealing. In a nutshell, if you stop giving in to bullying, it will stop. If you use force, you have to be prepared to accept that it will be met with equal or greater force in return. That's just how physics works. Don't just let it happen. Get even, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Yes, I still have some resentment about some of the things they did to me. I'm not going to let go of that toxic, vile situation until the day I die. I'll always remember these victories, even though I was up against the whole team. I have a story to share about this. When I was in elementary school, I had a friend who had a mental disability. This meant he was on the receiving end of quite a lot of bullying. There was one kid in particular who was especially bad. He would basically chase my friend around during lunch, tormenting him the whole time. My friend would always try to walk away or respond, which led to fights that happened all the time. The teachers didn't do anything to intervene. I did get some comments, but because of the groups I was in, I didn't really have to deal with the worst of it. Anyway, one day after class, I saw him arguing with a friend of mine, so I went over to see what was going on. Normally, I would try to help out, but this time I just gave the kid a good kick in the groin. As you might imagine, he left my friend alone from then on. I've got a story, one of the very first moments of badassness I ever experienced. It was the second grade, and me and my friends would play in the gravel at recess and make water canals. I live in an extremely rainy place. One day, this bully, who was in grade 5, 2 years above us, came up to our little group and bullied my friend so badly she started crying and ran to the bathroom. We followed her to make sure she was okay physically. There had been some hair pulling. And once we returned, the TCH and her crew had taken our spot at the gravel field. The rest of the day, I pondered how I could get my sweet, sweet revenge. I had a lot of anger issues back then. Then it hit me. She had been known for bragging about the food she got for lunch. She was upper class after all, and she would often bring these jumbo chips to school. She was also notorious for stealing food. As luck would have it that day, she brought the chips. So I waited for just after lunch and picked up the crumpled bag that she had discarded on the floor. I then filled it up with the muddy water in the makeshift water canals and made it look like I was chewing something. Lo, and behold, the Achol shows up, leans down and goes, "What ya eating?" I responded, "Chips." She proceeded to look me up and down and then tried to take the bag. I asked her if she wanted them, and she looked at me like I had just offended her. I hold it by the rims of the bag. Somehow she didn't see what was inside LMAO, and she does the same. Then I let go, and by now, she's just leaning over the bag, realizing what's in the bag. And I clap my hands on the bottom, sending a full-blown tsunami of muddy water straying at her. She ran away screaming and didn't come back. For months passed, and then on a sunny-ass day, I'm approached by her and a playground monitor, and she says they splashed me. I just about started laughing. We're now both in the same high school, and I'm 100% sure she wants to kill me. Still worth it, though. My mother was never a kind person. She's narcissistic and manipulative, and I despise her. Growing up, I never quite realized this. After all, your parents are supposed to support you, and love you, and care for you. And I always believed that she had. Around middle school, however, my rose-tinted goggles were removed. Since then, I have slowly grown up struggling in the wake of the mistakes she's made, supporting my younger brother, growing up essentially alone and isolated in a hell she created with her laziness and negligence. It took me a very, very long time to finally see through her lies. She always promised me it would be better, and that she really did love me, and I always believed her. And then, I just snapped. About a month ago, I finally left her for good, moved towns with the help of my sister, at the time with nothing but the clothes on my back. I have since gotten most of my valuable belongings from the house. At first, she contacted me under the guise of someone else, trying to convince me to talk to her over the phone. I knew very well that I can't handle myself over the phone or in person. I believe it is due to undiagnosed autism. So I told them, at the time believing this to be someone else, perhaps my grandmother, that I would only agree to speak over text. We got into a weird argument discussion. They believed that I was my sister speaking through text, because they didn't believe that I would have spoken so harshly to them. I told them that this was who I really was behind the mask of compliance I usually wore, and that if they didn't believe me, then they never truly knew who I was. Finding out later that this person was my mother was almost cathartic. Imagine your child telling you that you don't really know them. Your fully adult, very mature child, after running away from home, after stating that their mother was a cruel and manipulative person. I know it had to bite. Eventually, I pressured her into speaking to me over text. I told my mother that she had always been cruel to me, and that I hated her for it, that I didn't want to live with her, and neither did my siblings. When she tried to talk me into coming back, try to make amends and figure out a way it could work, I told her she had her chance and lost it, that I was never going to come back, and that I would be happier living alone and struggling than I ever would have been living with her. Now, I'm not a cruel person. I try to be kind to everyone, even the people who don't deserve it, because I have always watched people and tried to learn how to be understanding of everyone's circumstances. I have always believed in second chances. It's why it took me this long to get this far. So I gave her an ultimatum. I would get everything I needed from her, my social security, my birth certificate, etc., and she would never talk to me again. She reluctantly agreed to this after a 30-minute conversation in which I eventually cornered her and pressured her into it. However, there was another piece of that ultimatum towards her benefit. I would have her blocked on everything, but she could always read my Facebook profile. I don't update it often, but it's her only lens into the life of the child she failed. To me, being forced into realizing that after 20 years of supposedly caring for your son that he has grown to hate you, and only being able to watch him from a distance, being unable to speak to him at all because he simply will not let you, it is the ultimate punishment to any parent who remotely cares about her child. And for me, that makes it the ultimate revenge. I ditch my abusive mother. Because she claims she still cares about me, she's only allowed to watch me from a distance over social media and never talk to me. I hope her mistakes torment her. I had a math teacher freshman year who was very strict. He was nice, however, and I liked him, but I happened to have class with a bunch of preps and jocks who felt they were above a few algebra problems. I was sitting right next to one of the main troublemakers. I was tired. It was 10 a.m., and I was so over his outburst to the teacher. When it was my turn to pass the stack of assignment papers his way, I leaned in and whispered, "Be asterisk." He exploded. I was often a teacher's pet, so no one in the class believed that I called him any names, not even his buddies. He raised hell until the teacher sent him to the principal's office, and given his previous track record of disturbances, we didn't see him again for a while. My teacher was born with one leg longer than the other, so she walked a little differently for most of her childhood. From what I recall, she was the nerdy type as well and was always reserved, kept to herself, and not particularly feminine. She once asked one of the footballers out, and he replied, "I'd rather kiss a pile of dog shit." When she started high school, she went through a big physical change over the summer. She matured, learned how to apply makeup, figured out how to walk properly with her leg, and is and always will be a beautiful, confident woman. So that same guy asked her out, and she said yes. On their date, when he leaned in to kiss her, she pulled a tinfoil-wrapped pile of dog shit she had picked up earlier that day from her purse and smashed it on his face. She won that night, as you might guess. "Miss Kirkley, I miss you dearly. You were always so awesome. I'm still jealous of your dating life." I took a foods class in high school, and I also worked in cubicle kitchens, which were awkward but cooperative. Over the course of the class, I made friends with the people in my kitchen, and we started hanging out outside of work. I noticed that the other kitchen bullied this one particular guy because he knew more about cooking than they did. They didn't like it because it made them feel inadequate. We welcomed him into our kitchen, and since then, we've been more efficient than the other kitchen. We started early and finished early. But whenever we make a mistake, they gloat and mock our kitchen as their oven and pan start scorching their food to ashes. They think it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not. Even days later, we still come out on top no matter what. It was really satisfying to stay 2 steps ahead of them. The whole day was just whining and moaning because our new member kept correcting them so harshly and making them look bad for messing up. There was one kid in the 5th grade who was always picking on me. One time we had gym class, and it was recess. I told all of my friends in the class, who were also being harassed by her, to take a stand and do something. Afterward, I just waited at the center of the gym, knowing that she would strike. And she did. As soon as the insult started, I turned around, waved my hand, and started speaking in a deep, high-pitched voice. All of my friends, who were also being insulted, immediately pretended to be in a sort of possessed state and proceeded to chant some future dark prophecy stuff, though I can't quite remember what it was. For the rest of the year, she genuinely believed I was a magical being and that I had cursed her. I don't regret it. However, a few years later, we are now on decent terms and consider each other friends. Evangelos, Lord of Dark Prophecy. I was the shy kid in high school. Back then, I was what you'd expect from an introvert, depressed and wearing oversized clothes like sweaters, jogging pants, or shoes. I was also overweight and had trouble keeping up with my sleep schedule because of the amount of homework I got during the day and the fact that my mother harassed me nearly every day when I got home. Just to give you some background, this was before I started fighting to live my own life by my own set of rules, not by those written by people who are far weaker-minded than those who came up with them. For over 10 years, she tried to break me by forcing me to take homeschool classes, physically and mentally abusing me, and even going so far as to trash the living room, then forcing me and my brother to clean it up. By the time I turned 17, I joined the Army, hoping that if I graduated, I would still be able to redeem myself to her despite never doing anything wrong. She always told me, "I raised you better than that," or "I'm your mother, so I know everything about you." But she never taught me anything meaningful. I dropped out of school for medical reasons. For the entire 2020 to 2021 period, I was scared that I wasn't good enough to show my mother respect. I even went so far as to bash my head against the wall in my bedroom for half an hour before my mother confronted me and assured me that she was at fault. She never showed any willingness to accept her faults and still thinks I was the same introverted person I was in high school. When I left the Army, I had a new view of the world. I saw people who were supportive and those who were rough around the edges. They told me that to get things done, I had to take action, not just talk. They also said that if I wanted to live my life, I had to make choices. From that point on, I was motivated to lose weight, to wear clothes that fit me, and to train almost every night to shed some extra weight. I also started taking cold showers daily, regardless of the weather or season. I lost 66 pounds in 5 months. Fast forward to late August 2022. I got back from my weekly chores and saw that one of the water jugs was empty. I told my brother, who was a bit spoiled at the time, that if he emptied a jug, he had to do it an hour before I took all the jugs out to get them refilled. I ended up arguing with her about how she wasn't disciplining my brother because she only resorted to words, not actions, to tell him to learn. Things got pretty intense. She started throwing the water machine to the floor, destroying it, smashing it, and eventually trashed the living room over and over. After enduring her nonsense for over a decade, I finally lost my cool and threw a punch at her lower neck area, near her chest. Even though I wasn't using my full strength, I still sent her tumbling down the hallway of our little mobile home. At that point, I decided it was time to draw the line and make it clear that she wasn't going to cross my boundaries again. I spent the next 10 minutes telling her how she wasn't taking responsibility for her actions, how she wasn't a good role model for her kids, and how she always talked trash about them. Instead of accepting that she'd been sucker punched by her own son and given a lecture without any buffer between us, she threatened to call the cops on me. I stood my ground at my door and shoved her away several times when she tried to trash my room. I called my dad to break the tie. It was November 2022, and I don't regret a thing. I confronted the person who was the root of all my depression, my suffering, and treating my life like her own extension. I punched her, then went on with living my life, with now my own purpose, to never live for anyone, but to live for myself. I still live with my dad in a rental room of a house, with a part-time job on the weekends, and I'm going to community college. I was doing pretty well, now that I'm not bound by my mother.